last few weeks, we've been dealing with this monster called sin, the attitude of sin. The attitude of sin is terrible. He's an enemy to your life. He's an enemy to your family and your future. And so we want to deal with that. And last week we talked about how to deal with this monster. Number one is you've got to be born again. To deal with him, you must be born again. Again, go back and watch this last week. If you're not saved, go back and watch last week because I deal with how to be born again. So to deal with this monster, we've got to be born again. Secondly, you must esteem the reproach of Christ as greater riches than the pleasure of the treasures of sin, okay? In other words, no matter how much what sin means to you, you got to take it off of the shelf of idolatry and put it down here, put Jesus Christ up there, and you got to see that even the reproach of Christ, people making fun of you because you're not going to go out to that bar tonight. You've decided that's it. I'm not living in fornication and adultery anymore. The riches of Christ are greater than the treasures of sin. The Bible tells us in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 26, it says, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. For he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. This was talking about Moses. And Moses understood that the reproach of Christ is greater riches than the treasures of this world and sin. But number three, you must fear God more than what men think of you. If you're ever really going to get away from sin and walk, and I know sin stays with us, it's in us. And when I say get away from it, I mean, if you're going to walk victoriously, you must fear God more than what men think of you. What I mean by that is this: your friends are going to say, "Oh, come on, man." They don't understand why you don't go back out and get drunk and party the party life, and maybe some of you got to break up with them. They don't understand. What do you mean you got to break up with me? Look, you got to fear God more than what men think about you. The Bible says in verse 27 of Moses, it says, "By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. For he endured as seeing him who is invisible." What does that mean? It means this, is he forsook the world. And he wasn't fearful of what the king thought of him. He wasn't fearful of the king getting mad at him or people being wrath on him. He understood that I fear God more than men. Fourthly, you must daily yield your body and life to God as a living and holy sacrifice unto God. You got to daily yield your body. Say, God, I give you my body. Where do you find that in the Bible? The Bible says in Romans chapter 12. The Bible says in verse 1, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God. See, listen here. Romans 12:1 is telling us we got to bring our bodies, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our legs, our feet, our arms, our mind, our emotions, everything about us. We bring it to God. We say, God, I give it to you. I present it to you as a sacrifice, a holy sacrifice unto God, which is what? It's not unreasonable. He says it's your reasonable service to give your body to him. In other words, you're giving your body to him, no longer yielding it unto sin, but alive unto God. That's what Romans 6, verse 16 through 19 says here. It says, know ye not that to whom you yield your servants, yourself servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom you obey, whether of sin unto death, or he says, or of obedience unto righteousness. But then he says, but God be thanked that you were the servants of sin. Before you got saved, you were the servants of sin. But then he says, but you have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered unto you. Then he says, being then made free from sin, you became the servants of righteousness. I speak after the manner of men because of the infirmity of your flesh. Finish up, he says, for as ye have yielded your members of service to uncleanness to iniquity and iniquity. In other words, he says, just like you used to throw yourself at your sin, yield your members to do ungodly things. He says, now, even so now, yield your members service to righteousness and holiness. Here's what I'm saying here. That zeal that's been driving you to go out on Friday night, getting drunk and partying and all that stuff, he said, take that zeal, turn it around, and with that same zeal, you start yielding yourself to righteousness and to holiness. And if you don't yield your body to him, you won't walk holy. You'll live in sin. and you'll live in sadness. So come back next week. We'll do some more, okay?